Fire Emblem Engage is a tactical RPG that celebrates all the past Fire Emblem games by incorporating them as emblems that you can pair up with your units as you explore the vast region of Helios. Throughout your journey, you, the Divine Dragon, must set off to collect all 12 emblem rings to stop the evil Fell Dragon from rising once more. With 3 years passing since we had the release of Fire Emblem 3 Houses on the Nintendo Switch, this is the 14th entry, not including remakes, into the Fire Emblem series. Will this game manage to keep me actively engaged with its world building and deep strategy tactics? Or will it cast me into the fiery flames of despair, leaving a bit more to be desired? Well, let's find out.
Understood. Well,
shall we fight them? As you wish, Divine One. You whose bravery knows no equal.
No, let's run.
Huh?
We haven't the slightest idea who they are, and we don't know how they came to be here. Also, they worry me for some reason. So we run.
As soon as I booted up the game and saw the interesting intro, I could tell that this game was going to be a very colorful game. I tried to keep an open mind with this game when it came to the art style from the second we saw the reveal trailer way back in that fall direct. But something about this game art style just rubbed me off the wrong way. The main protagonist's hairstyle being split between red and blue, and the super vibrant, colorful atmosphere in the game setting just didn't yell out medieval game to me. Oftentimes, when I look at different forms of media, I often love the medieval fantasy world settings from The Lord of the Rings, Robin Hood, The Hobbit, Willow, just to name a few, and it stems all the way back into my childhood with the Chronicle of Narnia series. So when I found out that the Fire Emblem series existed, from Nintendo no less, I fell in love with the series instantly on that fateful day when I tried out Fire Emblem Awakening for the first time. Since then, I played Fates, Echoes, 3 Houses, and went back and played some of the classic Fire Emblem games such as Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, Blazing Blade, and a tad bit of Sacred Stones and Path of Radiance. I'm still working on those too. Something that all of these games had in common is that it's rich, high stakes, dark, enriching, sword clashing, war engrossing, death, dragon slaying goodness. But in Engage, I just don't get that feeling. I understand that the game developers took the unique artistic approach to give this game a greater overall appeal to the masses, which in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing considering that the strategy RPG genre is pretty niche to begin with. But by doing this, it feels that the game lost a lot of elements that makes a Fire Emblem game a Fire Emblem game. To bring this game to life, Intelligent Systems brought Mika Picasso as the game's illustrator on board. According to an ASA developer review, Ty, the director of Engage, stated that we were looking for an artist whose design style would appeal to a broad audience, including younger players, as well as the ability to portray a variety of characters. Among the candidates, Mika Picasso's son's designs were colorful, vivid, and really pop. They were a perfect fit for the flashy direction we wanted for this title. This artist is well known for their work for VTubing, and it is blatantly clear you can get that vibe just by looking at the main protagonist. None of the past Fire Emblem games gave me this kind of vibe, but it just felt out of place considering the series past. Mind you, not all the character designs from this game were bad in my opinion. People like Diamant were a spitting image of characters that just scream Fire Emblem to me. Looking back at it, pretty much all the characters from Brodia had that classic Fire Emblem look in my eyes. So overall, I wasn't a fan of the art direction as a whole, but there were some good characters in the mix. In terms of the graphics, I must say that this is the most stable and fluid a Fire Emblem game has ever looked for me. I could tell just by looking at the opening cutscene that they definitely put in some work with this game in comparison to some of the past Fire Emblem games like 3 Houses. This game was made in the Unity engine, and while experiencing this game, I never ran into any frame drops, graphic issues, or any other oddities. Seeing that this game run like this, from selecting the characters and seeing their auto animations before they land a deadly critical hit, just felt like a chef's kiss to me. It actually makes me feel quite excited knowing that the series keeps this fluid animation with its cutscenes, gameplay, and menu options. I can only imagine what the next game could look like. Now, one of the things I believe the game excels in the most is by far the gameplay. The whole concept of using the Engage rings to unite with past Fire Emblem characters sounded a bit fishy at first, but put into practice can offer up an interesting dynamic. In this game, you can equip different emblem rings such as Marth, Celica, Ike, Corn, Violet, etc. to a member on your team, and they will share unique skills that resonate with them in their respective games. Pairing the emblems with characters that could complement off another skills was a true delight. For example, you could pair Celica and Saline with, which, if you were thinking about that kind of a pairing, it would boost Saline's magical stats, and on top of that, you will get the unique move called Warp Ragnarok, which would help you teleport a far distance off into the map and unleash a devastating attack. Each emblem has their own special attack, so pairing them with your units and deciding what works best for you with whatever map you may be on, your objectives and goals, was what made this game shine in a lot of ways. Also, the weapon triangle is finally back. The weapon triangle was benched in 3 houses, which gave you a lot of flexibility of choosing whatever units you personally like best. This allowed you to reclass them into whatever unit you like based upon the character and whether you wanted them to be a swordsman, a cavalier, a mage, etc. The unique thing they did with this game is the whole concept of the break system. If you were to hit an enemy sword unit with a lance, it will break them so they can't counterattack for the rest of your player turn. This in itself adds a nice complementing layer on top of the weapon triangle. It will reward you whenever you place your more favorable units in front of the enemy to take on oncoming attacks, as well as punish you if your formations in your armies were susceptible to weak weapon pairings. Whenever you were tuckered out from battle and just wanted to take a nice calm break from the action, you have the option of going back to the Somnial, which is essentially your base of operations. Here you're able to talk to your units, train your units, eat with your parties, buy weapons and items, take pictures, and do a bit of wyvern riding, and my personal favorite, interacting with your favorite dog, Sami. He's just a good boy. The one thing I would compliment with the Somnial in comparison to the monastery in 3 houses is how mainstream all the actions are. You can quickly gather your items, do your activities without the feeling that you're feeling micromanaged compared to the month system in 3 houses where you have to properly plan out the whole month's activities. You can basically do an activity at your own pace. The one negative thing about all of this is how quick the support systems fly under the radar, or how quickly some of them end. Normally when you hit the menu in the past games, the support option's right there plain as day. But in this game, it's a bit out of the way. You have to hit the references button, then toggle down to the support option to find it. It took me a while to find this option while it was early on in my adventure. Speaking of supports, let's go ahead and talk about the characters in this game. I will say that I felt that many of the characters just felt pretty bland in this game. These cast of characters were like eating a batch of popcorn. Sure, there was a bunch of good, salty, buttery pieces in the batch, but oftentimes a good chunk just came out burnt, a bit more to be desired. The fact that many of the emblem bond connections only last a couple of sentences between the emblem and the normal unit didn't sit right with me. With this being an anniversary game of sorts at its roots, I thought we would have gotten a bit more story and a bit more interaction between all the levels of supports of the emblem and your units, instead of the conversation falling flat under 15 seconds. While many of the conversations felt flat, I love ones such as Alir's and Yunaka's support, showing how an assassin had trust issues and thus had to lie all the time. She had to learn how to put aside and try to grow more accepting to telling the truth and being honest with herself. Was she all there at the end? Well, it kind of depends on whether or not you gave her the pack ring at the end. In the past Fire Emblem games, there were S supports that allowed you to marry characters such as like in Fire Emblem Awakening, Fates, and even 3 houses near the end of the game. But in this game, they took a different approach that is similar to S supports, but not exactly so. This allows you to form a deeper bond with whoever you want, regardless of gender. So I found Yunaka's conversation very enlightening. Now, for those that love the social elements and the supports in 3 houses, don't expect too much of that in this game. While it was nice that they dialed that back a bit from 3 houses, I felt like they backpedaled so hard that it came at a fault. When you play a game in this series, you're going to see sick moments like critical hits, your unit enduring a hit with 1 HP, and yes, enemy units killing your units with 3% crit rate, sending your unit to the grave. But what meaningful or significant impact will that leave you with when you can't resonate with your units? The fact that the supports are slightly hidden, the bond supports are extremely short, and a lot of the character interactions leaving a bit more to be desired, it just left a lot more to be desired, considering how in a few years from now, if someone mentions Alcris, I'm just gonna be like, who's that again? But if somebody were to mention Ferdinand von Isaac, I clearly know that that's from Fire Emblem Three Houses. As for the music, I honestly can't say too much on this subject, which is extremely disappointing. Normally in each Fire Emblem game, I normally can remember at least one track from the game's OST that was extremely catchy or had a meaningful impact on me at a critical moment in the game's story. The fact that this game doesn't have any standout tracks to me is a bit devastating. Now, there are some interesting good remixes from past Fire Emblem games in here, aka the amiibo scanning, and some of the parallel battles to max out your bond supports for your emblems. But setting those aside, in terms of a brand new, unique tracks, it's just not quite there. I can still remember the catchy theme from Trouble from Shadow Dragon, Devoted from Radiant Dawn, Lost in Thoughts All Alone from Fates, and Edge of Dawn along with Between Heaven and Earth from Three Houses, just to name a few of the amazing tracks throughout the series' history. Now, there were a few tracks in here that were solid, but nothing that just stood out in my honest opinion. The only one I likely remember is the main theme from Engage, but not for the best of reasons, but the instrumental version doesn't sound as bad as the vocal one. Now, as for the story, this might have been the lowest on the totem pole in terms of Fire Emblem games for me. Yes, I know some people's least favorite might be Fates for the fan service or parts of the story, but in my opinion, I really enjoyed those games. But in terms of this game, I always felt like the story was always foreshadowed in a certain way where I basically knew what was going to happen next in the plot. I was always a couple of steps ahead. From the very beginning, you are informed that you need to collect 12 emblem rings to stop the Fell Dragon, who is close to rising once more. Once you complete the opening sequence, your adventure begins and you set out to find those 12 emblem rings. Honestly, the basic plot is laid out there right in front of you, and it doesn't really deviate off of the path very much. In some ways, with this game being an anniversary game of sorts, I feel like the inclusion of the emblem rings and trying to drag in all these past Fire Emblem characters representing the 13 games in the series we got prior to this one was always going to be a crutch in my mind. It would lack its own identity in a lot of ways since it is really leaning heavy with a lot of past elements and characters. By far, Marth was the most influential out of all the emblems, but it was a shame to see how many other ones couldn't get the spotlight nearly as much compared to him. But I always felt that this would be an inevitability. In many other games, when they hit you with the betrayals and the backstabs, plot twists, lore drops, and everything else in between, it often caught us off guard or got us to drop our jaws in excitement, awe, or devastation, but I just didn't experience those emotions. Remember how I said the art style didn't quite feel like Fire Emblem with its super vibrant colors? Let me remind you that all this time in this game, you are constantly in war with the Fell Dragon's army. And tell me why it never really felt like a war till we reached Brodia, where they literally had like armies clashing out on the battlefield in that actual cutscene. And then also when they burned down a certain town. I was only reminded that we were in an all-out war against the corrupted, the Four Hounds, along with the Fell Dragon until those two particular moments. There are also some confusing and questioning moments in this game that caused me to scratch my head a little or caused me to shake it in disbelief when I got to those moments in the late game. If you manage to get to chapters 21 and onward, then you may know exactly what I mean. I've seen a lot of good Fire Emblem stories playing through a lot of the series, and just seeing how this one didn't quite deliver just kills me a little bit in the inside. When you play a 50+ hour RPG and a strategy one at that, you're expecting an A-OK story at best, or at least a middle of the line kind of story at the bare minimum. But when you have to dig your feet in the trenches in this 50+ hour long game, despite the combat being extremely good, it just leaves a constant sour taste in your mind, and it's just really hard to shake it. I could say a lot more on the story and bring up some more specific points, but that would delve into spoiler territory, so I'll have y'all experience that for yourself. So, to wrap everything up, Fire Emblem Engage at its core is a fantastic strategy RPG combining many classic elements such as the weapon triangle from the series' history and expanding upon its depth, including the new break system which rewards and punishes players for each actions they make on the battlefield. They added an interesting concept with the emblem rings, which diversified the combat even more by allowing units to pair up with emblems and gain signature moves and skills, some of which you can inherit for yourself, which allow for unique combinations, giving your army an edge that can turn the tide of war, such as moves like Blazing Lion or Warp Ragnarok. The game, however, just falls a bit flat when it comes to its art style and sets up the game's overall setting, which this game runs and looks beautifully speaking from a graphic sense. It just loses that overall Fire Emblem vibe that it felt in all of those 13 previous games in the series. The story didn't hit the right strides that I come to love in many Fire Emblem games, and the cast of characters felt mixed at best. Not all of them were bad, there were a few good chunks of them that were great in my opinion. So, if you don't own Fire Emblem Engage, the big question y'all might be thinking now is, should you buy Fire Emblem Engage? The answer to that question relies solely on whether or not do you love the gameplay, or did you play a lot of past Fire Emblem games. If so, I believe that there may be something in this game that you may be able to appreciate. I like seeing all of the past Fire Emblem characters in this game and playing through the paralogs and reminiscing in the remixed music from the past games. But if you don't have any experience from the past Fire Emblem games or love strategy RPGs in general, it would be hard for me to recommend this game to newcomers. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I would highly recommend playing games like Awakening, Yes Fates, Echoes, or Three Houses as one of your first experiences, and expanding upon that if you love those games. Now, some of y'all might be looking for a score I would give for this game, and that is hard to justify. I feel like all of my thoughts were expressed in this review. I pretty much felt like I left everything out there on that table. Whether I told you the games were a 3 out of 5 or a 6 or 7 out of 10, I feel like that's very hard to justify like that. So I'll leave you with my words instead, which say a lot more than just some numerical numbers. With all of that said, that is it for my review for Fire Emblem Engage. If you really like this video, make sure to go ahead and hit that like button, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that bell to stay up to date on all things video game related I feel like talk about and discussing for the foreseeable future though. So remember y'all, until whatever video I make next, hiya papaya. Alright, okay, I get it. I know what some of y'all might be thinking. That sounded a little bit weird though, but I have to say, Yunaka was literally one of my most favorite characters in that game, along with my good boy Sami over there. Those were like two of my personal highlights, along with a handful of other characters that really kind of made the game for me and literally made me forge through and finish this game. Because, oh my gosh, that story though, oh shoot. All right, I think I left everything else in the review. I think I made my piece, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.